Of course, the comments are going to have disabilities because this is propaganda. Propaganda is very similar to a commercial. The same way when you watch Coca-Cola commercials, you know that everything they're going to say is going to be things that are positive towards that beverage. So they're not going to say of what it does to your teeth. They're not going to talk about other beverages that might be better than Coca-Cola. All they're doing is that they're trying to persuade you that the drink is what you need. And this is what propaganda is. But in the case of commercials, you have your guard up because you expect that the commercial is trying to persuade you to buy a product. When it comes about political ideas, most people do not have their guard up. If the political idea comes from an authoritative source, then people are willing to just outright believe it. And this is why the comments are being given the disability treatment, is so that you don't see other people who disagree with this propaganda offer you a different take, which is what I am here to do, actually. I'm going to offer you a different take.
What is truly Scandinavian?
Grattis!
Absolutely nothing.
Nada.
Niente.
There is no such thing.
I gotta say, they could have gave more cultish vibes if they tried. So you have the ominous music, and now you have the two girls staring blankly into the camera, telling you that there is no such thing. I expect them to pull out a knife or an axe from behind them if you disagree. Holy hell. Right, so what I found interesting is that there are studies which show that there are people in society, usually people who seek safety into the group, who don't really care whether or not what they're seeing here is true or false. But what they care is, if I am going to say this opinion in public, will people accept me? So because this opinion is being given by an authoritative source, they will say, okay, well, if I repeat in public that there is no such thing as Scandinavian, then the group will accept me. Even if they know that this is not true. I mean, their parents told them about what it is to be Scandinavian. Their grandparents knew what it is to be Scandinavian. But that's not the point. They don't really care whether or not it's true. They only care, will I get in trouble if I go against the grain? And usually these are, I can't really call them as weak people, but I guess like people who don't like confrontation. And they need the group to help them out if they're in trouble. Usually corporate drones, people that are very weak and cannot defend themselves. These are usually the archetype that would receive messages like this and don't even think for a second whether they're true or not. They will just say, all right, well, I need to think this because otherwise I'm going to get in trouble.
Such thing.
Everything is copied. Our
Vi
democracy,
människor som tillsammans formar framtiden.
credit goes to Greece. Parental leave,
Thank you, Switzerland.
the iconic Scandinavian windmills were actually invented in Persia. And we made the German bicycle a staple of our cities. It's Turkish,
What?
Smapple?
Dutch,
What about licorice?
it's Chinese, and
Midsommarstången?
German.
And it gets worse.
rumor has it the oh-so-Swedish meatballs might not be as Swedish as you think, but Turkish.
Even the Danish isn't Danish.
It's Austrian. And the pride of Norway, the paperclip, was actually invented by an American.
And while we're at it,
America, thank you for taking the first steps in empowering the women's rights movement. We're no better
than our Viking ancestors.
We take
And this right here is done on purpose because, you know, back when the Vikings existed, they didn't have airplanes to travel. The world wasn't so interconnected. It wasn't so multicultural. So chances for people of African descent to exist as Vikings is the exact same chance as you would have white people existing as Aztec emperors. Doesn't make any sense, and that's the purpose. It's not supposed to make any sense. The contradiction of this propaganda needs to be so strong that people know that, hold on, this can't be true. But if you want to seek safety with the group, if you want to be accepted in polite society, you need to accept the lie. But not only that, then talk about the lie. So what is the actual lie? Well, the lie is the fact that if you can identify where something is coming from, if you can identify the parts of certain thing, then that thing ceases to exist. So just because democracy comes from Greece, then you can't say that Sweden is a democratic country. And this is an idea that comes from academia. Now, when you think about academia, you would think about the marketplace of ideas. You would think people throwing around different concepts until the best idea comes forward. But that is true for the past. Now we live in a different academia of safe spaces, of political correctness, of things that are allowed and things that aren't allowed to be said, of professors getting fired over wrong thing. So today's version of academia does not have the rigorous Socratic debate. No, it's got like the professors that are in power who have gate-kept, making sure that only other professors that share their ideology and worldview got to get promoted. Everyone else got fired. And that is the academia, right? So they're coming up with this postmodernist view that if you identify the elements where something is coming from, then that thing ceases to exist. Now, in the case of democracy, it's a very good example. Just because it was invented in Greece doesn't mean that the same democracy which existed in Greece now exists in Scandinavia. Because culture doesn't work that way. Culture has always been shared by people. This concept of, oh, well, cultural appropriation is wrong because blah, 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 that doesn't apply to the real world. Culture is not like intellectual property. Things appear, and then if it's really good, like if it's a good idea, it's going to spread to other nations. And other nations, once they take something, like for example, when Scandinavia takes democracy, it's going to put its own Scandinavian twist to it. And the democracy that you find in Scandinavia is very different than the democracy which you find in Germany, or you find in Romania, or you find in the United States. Like, for example, and this is what a Scandinavian friend told me, that within the Scandinavian mentality, the freedom of movement, the human right of freedom of movement is absolute. Like, if someone actually walks through your garden, it's very difficult to use the law to remove that person from your garden, as long as they're just traveling. So they're not sitting there, but like they're moving through your garden, and they're not stepping on the grass or anything, but they're just like moving through. So because of that, like during the pandemic, you did not see in Scandinavia the government trying to restrict people's movement like you saw it in Germany. Because in Germany, they do not have the same concept of the absolute when it comes to the freedom of movement. So it's just one example, but like you can talk about food. I mean, you can go into the United States and you can order Chinese, and what you're going to see is that the food is very oily. Usually, it's got a lot of cooking oil in it. But if you travel to China, you're going to notice that the Chinese food is prepared differently. Why? Because despite the fact that the food comes from China, they have managed to put an American twist to it, and they have changed it in a way that it becomes American. And then you might ask, well, okay, but if that's the case, what is Scandinavian? And the answer is, it's like when you go as a tourist to Scandinavia, you will notice what is Scandinavian. Simply because you notice people behaving differently than they do in your home country. It's very difficult for a Scandinavian to articulate what is Scandinavian because he always existed in Scandinavia. It's very difficult for a fish to describe what water is because they always existed in water. And I had this happen when I went to London. I noticed a lot of things that are inherently British. And the reason they are British is because the overwhelming amount of people in Britain practice them. And that's what it means to be British. Just like that's what it means to be Scandinavian. When all the people in the country are partaking into a sort of cultural event, you can say that cultural event is Scandinavian. Even though that if that same cultural event can exist in other places of the world. Now imagine how evil it is to tell people that there is nothing Scandinavian. So there is no culture. In fact, there's not even an ethnicity because as we can see, the ancestors of Vikings can be literally from everywhere. Like even a Japanese man probably is the ancestors of Vikings. The question then becomes when you have a conflict like today with Russia, why would the Scandinavians even be interested in defending their country? Because at the end of the day, well, you know, our ancestors, the Vikings, could have been Russians as well, right? And there's nothing Scandinavian, so like, what is the point? I would love to ask this from the academia that came up with this concept, that there is nothing Scandinavian. And if it's like, if there's nothing Scandinavian, why defend it? Who cares, right? I mean, imagine if you go into a company like Coca-Cola, and you would be lectured by Coca-Cola's HR in various corporate retreats telling you that, well, you know, there is nothing actual Coca-Cola, because all the substances that we make in our drink exist in other drinks. We haven't done anything differently. I mean, the recipe that we use has been done in another country before and blah, blah, blah. Imagine telling your employees that. I mean, there would be no more employee loyalty if that's the case. And employee loyalty is actually very important. I mean, without it, you can still have a company. It's still going to function. People will still go there just to get a paycheck, but that's pretty much it. The moment they're going to be offered a better deal, they're going to go to another company. And you want to avoid that. A company that has high employee loyalty, you're going to notice that people are willing to put in extra hours without getting paid for them. You're going to notice that people will turn down better offers from other companies just because they like the place where they work at. You may notice that when things are going bad and the company is not doing so good, they're not going to abandon ship. They're going to still try to work there. Which is why no company would try to demoralize its own employees. And I think the comparison is kind of apt, because at the end of the day, some corporations, especially the large ones, they are kind of like countries in a way. That, I mean, the way they're being governed, I mean, it's kind of the same thing. You know, you want the people to be loyal to the brand and to be loyal to the company. And yeah, I mean, it isn't that bad of a comparison. So the question is, like, if Coca-Cola won't try to lecture its employees about how evil Cola was in the past and when they created Fanta to do business with the Nazis, and how Coca-Cola is actually not something original because the ingredients can be found in other places, and all they did is like they took the recipe from someone else and blah, blah. Like if they were to do that, assuming that that would be true, right? If they were to do that, why would they? Like, why would they try to demoralize the people working there? It makes absolutely no sense. Just like it makes no sense why the Scandinavian people would demoralize their own citizens. So, I don't know if I made this video before. I might have. But, like, if I did, I used different arguments. That's for sure. There is a person on Subscribestar which asked me to talk about Scandinavia because he found this video and wanted to know my take. And I couldn't find any previous video where I talked about it. I make a lot of videos, so I don't remember the thumbnail or the title. It's possible that I have seen it on Discord and I just didn't make a video about it, or I talked on a stream. But here it goes. You know, I made it again. If I apologize if that's the case, if I made it years ago. But definitely there's different arguments now. And yeah, if you guys want to support this channel, there's a link to my Subscribestar in the pinned comment. And I hope you like this video. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you in the comment section. Take care.